In today's video, let's look into 5 dimensions of how strategy consulting and restructuring differ. So all these dimensions are based on project experience, so let's jump right in. So first we have the solution space, and here it should be noted that in strategy consulting this is much more unrestricted than in restructuring, where it's pretty restricted. So to give an example here, think of the cash flow statement. So you have cash flows from operations, from investments, and from financing, and you're not really supposed to change that or come up with a fourth category. I mean, give it a try and show it to your project manager or the bank. Not sure what they're gonna say. And in strategy consulting, this is really different because the structure is really one of your key contributions to the project. So if you're, for example, doing a market analysis, the buckets that you center your analyses around, that's really one of your key contributions and they need to be inside for. Or if it's more of a capability focused project, which perspectives do you propose to take on the organization? How do you slice and dice the organization to inform actions? That's really your key contribution. This is also reflected in the measures that you propose to the client. So in restructuring, you typically have a toolbox of measures that are known to work out well in the situation at hand. So for example, factoring or deferring payments. This is nothing new, nothing that requires creativity or anything, but it needs to be applied properly in the case at hand, and that's your job in restructuring. In strategy consulting, it's a whole different story, and it's also reflected in the firm's delivery capability. So for example, here you have an expert network, you have a graphics department, you have a research department, and all these kind of things are centered around project delivery. So it's not really about specific well-known solutions, but about ideating solutions for the specific case at hand. Next, let's look into complexity, and in strategy consulting, you're primarily dealing with logical complexity, whereas in restructuring, it's primarily technical complexity. So to give an example here, in a restructuring project, we had a situation where just before an important meeting, the gap in midterm financing changed by 0.1 million, and we didn't really know why until we figured out that it was because of our optimization of working capital, which now was product specific, and before it hadn't been product specific. And this is just an example of a very complex model that you have in the background here, and that drives, well, key results, and you need to be aware of these complex relationships. So it's really technical and in-depth in terms of this. In strategy consulting, it's more about your line of argumentation that needs to make sense and that needs to convince the client, and it's not numbers that add up. So for example, a gap in midterm financing can be closed by a set of measures. Here you can really calculate it. Are these measures sufficient to close that gap, yes or no? In strategy consulting, it's more about crafting that line of argumentation. So let's say we're doing a growth strategy for a manufacturer of washing machines and they want to grow sales in their complements. So for example, when you think about washing powder, it really sucks if you have it all over your hands when you use your washing machine. And they want to go with something like Nespresso capsules and sell washing powder in this. And the question is that a good idea? And then you figure out 3 supporting arguments. The first one, maybe 70% of customers in a recent survey said that it really sucks to have washing powder all over your hands after using a washing machine. The second argument might be, well, you could increase prices based on this and charge 30% more for each gram of washing powder if sold in capsules rather than boxes. And the third argument might be that, well, there's George Clooney and he advertised Nespresso capsules, and if you reuse him for this different context, that will uplift sales by 20% as opposed to using a testimonial that's not well known in this context. So while this was a qualitative line of argumentation, I supplemented it with numbers to make it quantitative. So it's not really clear cut if something is qualitative or quantitative, but you could not sum up these 3 arguments. Like you can, for example, sum up the measures in a restructuring project to close a gap in midterm financing. So that's really the key difference here. Actually, I pretty much already covered the rationale now. So in strategy consulting, this is more qualitative, as I just outlined, whereas in restructuring, it's more quantitative, and you can really mathematically break things apart. So this brings us to activities, and here in strategy consulting, you're primarily working on your PowerPoint strawman, and you're concerned with structuring and storylining in there. And in restructuring, you're pretty much busy with your financial models and getting the numbers right. So to start with the financial models, one of your key concerns is always reconciliation. So the numbers in your integrated business plan should seamlessly go together with the numbers in your short-term liquidity model. In strategy consulting, you need thinking frames like, for example, situation complication resolution to guide your thinking, or ideas like vertical and horizontal flow of storylines in your slide deck. So these should be concepts to be familiar with. Finally, we have tools, and here you should know that strategy consulting is actually 90% PowerPoint work and 10% Excel work. And for restructuring, it's just the other way around. So it's probably that you're spending 90% of your time in Excel in the first couple of years in restructuring. And because of these differences, you need to follow different strategies for learning these tool skills efficiently. So for restructuring Excel skills, I suggest you check out my playlist on financial modeling Excel hacks. In terms of PowerPoint, it's harder because you really need practice with this to build slides. What I suggest here is that you, as soon as possible, start to build your own slide library. So actually there are around like 15 or 16 slide archetypes that you see all over the place. And if you're familiar with these 15, 16 archetypes of slides, then you're pretty much able to build 80% of slide decks. So that's it for today. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.